Good morning. This is Steve with a much rounded face than you saw me last due to steroids that I'm on. Sorry about that. The cancer is progressing, and yeah, so I'm a little puffy around the face. But I want to pick up my story. We're going to call this chapter 4 of my life. Um, I got discharged from the Navy in September of 1970. If I remember right, I was on the USS Zalima at that time, a refrigeration ship that was shipping food back and forth to soldiers in Vietnam. And I was discharged to San Diego when the Zalima parked there. So the first thing I did after getting out of the Navy is move home with my parents. That was the only place I had to go. Um, and interestingly, I had sent 4 boxes by U.S. mail from Vietnam to my house. Nice 2 by 2 cardboard boxes. 3 of them had clothing and personal effects. One of them had 4 1-pound metal coffee cans with plastic lids loaded with sifted pot. This is how stupid I was. Again, I tell you, had I been caught, I would have done 10 to 15 years in federal prison. Not like it is today when pot is a slap on the hand. It wasn't then. It was considered a highly illegal substance. Well, when I got home, I walked into my bedroom where my parents had put the 4 boxes and had not opened them. 2 of them had been opened and rewrapped by U.S. Customs, and they missed the pot. In those days, they didn't have pot-sniffing dogs like they have today. So again, the mercy of God, right? Mercy of God. Well, I was very popular around Sonoma because I was giving out 1-ounce bags to everybody of sifted Vietnamese pot. So everybody loved me. I had an immediate association of friends. So I lived with my parents for a month or two. But what I really wanted was to drop out and be part of this amazing hippie scene that was happening, mostly in San Francisco, but stretching up the North Coast as well. So I wanted to buy a school bus and remodel it into a nice mobile home. So I did. I bought a 49 Chevrolet school bus, really nice bus. I think I paid, I don't know, I think $800 for it. It wasn't much. And of course, I double decked it, where the wheel wells come up inside the bus. I did a platform, a raised platform. So it was a step up into my bedroom, had curtains, double bed, nice double bed. Underneath the platform, I stored my surfboards and my skis and all of that. Uh, had a couch that I had drilled a hole in the floor of the school bus so I could pivot the couch into the front of the bus and use it as a driver's seat, or I could pivot it back to the wall and it would become a couch. Had a wood burner stove. I was working on a kitchen. Nice bus, really nice. Ran great. So, yeah, I worked on it at my parents' for a few months till I got it where I wanted. And then I moved up to Glenelg, and some friends I knew had an acre lot and a house. And they had a big cornfield, nice rows of corn. So I parked my bus in the middle of their cornfield. So you couldn't even see the bus. The bus was covered by stalks of corn because I didn't know. They didn't, the authorities didn't like people living in school buses. So it was pretty well hidden. And I had an electric extension cord from their house. So I had lights in my bus and lived cheaply. Now, mind you, when I got out of Vietnam, I had about, I don't know, $7,000, something like that I had saved during my military pay. I had nowhere to spend it in Vietnam. So I was pretty well off. In those days, you could buy a 3-bedroom house in Glen Ellen for $7,000 on a half acre. Stupid me, I didn't. I spent it all on drugs, LSD, and living expenses, buses, guitars. Went down the city, bought a Martin, beautiful Martin. Learned to play guitar, grew my hair long, got that ring in my nose, that big brass ring in my nose, and dog's teeth necklaces, and was trying to be as radical as I could be. So about that time, I was down in Sonoma Plaza one day, hanging out on the plaza, loaded probably, um, and these two beautiful girls came riding up on horseback. The one I was most attracted to was Anne, who became my girlfriend, and later I married. Well, at the time, Anne was 13. She was a quite developed 13. I mean, she obviously already had breasts and everything. She was quite developed at 13, so I had no idea she was 13. Didn't have any idea. Didn't even ask. We struck up a friendship, and before you knew it, we were seeing one another. And before you knew it, I took her virginity in the school bus. And we began a 3-year sexual relationship. I was 23. She was 13. Her father was absent from the home. Her mother was an alcoholic nurse that would come home and drink herself into oblivion into the night. Didn't care where her daughter was, too drunk to care. So many nights Anne spent with me in the bus, some nights at home. Terrible sin on my part, terrible. I look back on it with deep regret. Started dropping acid more and more, mescaline. Spent most of my time stoned on one or the other thing. Used to hang out a lot in San Francisco at the Fillmore Auditorium or Avalon Ballroom, listening to groups like Janis Joplin and Cream and Joe Cocker. These were like, I guess, more common rave parties. Everybody stoned on acid, strobe lights, or light shows. That was my life for several years, just hanging out in San Francisco. Finally, at that point, I got tired of the school bus, or I was asked to leave the property that I was at for one reason or another. I lost my spot. So I parked the school bus back at my parents' house, and I had heard about this hippie commune up on Cavedale Road in Sonoma. So one February, it was snowing, and I wanted to see the snow, and I knew there was snow up in Cavedale. It was way up there, about 3,000-foot level. So I drove up to Cavedale and decided to go for a hike in the snow, which I did. And I came across a set of footprints that were hiking in the snow. So I thought that was cool. Somebody else was out there, so I kind of followed the footsteps. Came to a log where two people were sitting. And that was a man who went by the name Rainbow. His real name was Perry, but he went by the name Rainbow. And he was sitting by a very attractive young woman, 19 or 20, I guess, named Jeanette. And they greeted me very warmly, and we struck up a beautiful conversation. And, they had some light in them. They were, you looked at them and they had some light. They were happy people. And well, Rainbow told me that he owned a 12.5-acre mountaintop and that he had a commune called Love Light Ranch. Well, I'd heard about this commune and, I had intended to visit it, and here I met him. And he invited me up that day. So I went up to the commune, and Jeanette, we went up. At that particular time, Jeanette was not living on the commune. She was living down in Boyce Hot Springs somewhere, but got connected with Rainbow. Started going up there a lot, just to hang out. It was a neat scene up there. There were several people that had built some really cool little handmade houses and up in the commune. So there was kind of an organic scene happening up there, eating meals together and stuff like that. So eventually, I asked Rainbow if he would allow me to move up there. He said, well, a matter of fact, he said, there's a cabin available. A sister that built the cabin has gone on a long trip somewhere, and her cabin is available, and she told me to let anybody that wanted it to move into it until she got back. So I had temporary lodging up there. So I moved into this little commune. It wasn't big. It was maybe 12 by 5. 12 by 5. It had a bed. Had an old 1906 Wedgwood stove with propane. It had a water tank up on the driveway that had a hose going down to the cabin. So you'd fill the 50-gallon plastic garbage can with water, and you'd have running water down in your cabin. So I had a nice old cabin. But I started building my own, and I built it strong. I was on a hillside, a very steep hillside, very steep, like 30% grade. I worked like a dog, moving huge boulders down the hill with a Johnson bar, setting up solid foundation. I used 4x4 construction on everything. I had money, mind you. I had money. Most of the hippies didn't. Most of the hippies were building with secondhand material, not Steve Cavalli. I built a beautiful cabin, brand new plywood floor, 4x4 joists, really nice, beautiful walls, a bay window. I had dug my bed into the bank, so my bed was, pushed out from the wall into its own alcove, with a little roof. So I had a nice living room, had a 1906 Wedgwood stove, really nice. I had a deck all around the house with, I built it around the existing trees, so the trees came right up through my deck, pine trees. So I had a beautiful deck. I had a 50-mile view all the way to the Golden Gate Bridge. Beautiful cabin. Never completed it. Never quite completed it. One day, well, that's another story. Eventually, one day, the building code, the top guy, was on a drive with his wife and had gotten out of the car up on Cavedale Road, and he heard hammering. So he actually hiked through the brush, down the hill through the brush, found my cabin, sighted it, ordered me to tear it down, or they would prosecute for an illegal cabin. He never caught any of the others. He just got mine. Well, anyway, that's another story. But I lived there, working on my cabin, living in the other one for about 6 months, and would come up, sleep with me, stay up there with me often. So one day, this couple came up, a Jewish man, Jonathan Gainsborough, and guess who? Jeanette, the one I'd met on the log that day, who was his girlfriend. They came up and they asked if they could move on the commune, and Rainbow said yes. And so a bunch of us got together, and there was always piles of building materials up there. There were windows and doors and lumber. Everybody was scavengers, We had, whenever we'd see anything usable, we'd bring it up to the commune, So there was stuff there to help them build a house. And in about a week or two, we had built them a nice, maybe 10 by 16 cabin. A nice cabin with a lot of old windows and doors and stuff. Cute little cabin. Made it very secure, insulated it, made it nice. Well, I noticed they were sleeping together in the same bed, but they said they were celibate. Well, that was weird. I mean, nobody was celibate in the 70s. I mean, everybody is free love, right? So I thought that was kind of strange. I didn't even know how that was possible to sleep in the same bed with a woman and not have sex, be celibate. So one day I'm in his cabin to visit. Excuse me. I was in his cabin, and I noticed this big black Bible sitting over there in his bed. And with some disdain, I said, you read that thing? He said, yeah, I read it. Well, actually, much of this testimony is in my story, my testimony. So I don't even need to go there. Okay, you can listen to my testimony, and a lot of that is there. Okay, not all of it. So let's see here. Well, you know what happened after that. I broke up with Ann, and that's when I took that trip north. That's all talked about in the first video, my testimony, how I got saved. So you know that story if you've listened to that. Well, when I came back from my journey, I didn't want to go back to the commune anymore. This needed to change, and that's when I rented a little house in Glen Ellen. Still with Ann, a cute little cabin in Glen Ellen, my ideal hippie house, so cute, you know. I brought my 1906 Wedgwood with me everywhere I went, so I had it there, you know, in the cabin. Cute little place. Had a beautiful organic garden, gorgeous organic garden. Matter of fact, it was the talk of the town. At that point, I had enrolled in the Santa Roseview Junior College because I had the GI Bill. And I think by that time, I had taken the ring out of my nose and cut my hair a little. I wasn't so radical as I was earlier. Going to college, you don't want to look like that. So I did trim up a little bit. So I was taking advertising and bookkeeping and small business administration. And I took an organic gardening class at the junior college. And I had the best garden. Oh my gosh, I grew everything from Jerusalem artichokes to potatoes to corn to everything. People would come and marvel over my garden, probably one of the best in the county. I was eating healthy bulgur wheat, trim and slim and all of that. About that time, I had stayed in touch with Jonathan Gainsborough. And he had been preaching the gospel to me, which I was not interested in, but I did appreciate his, quote, energy, his vibes. And we didn't have a close relationship, but we were in touch. And he told me that he was going up to a church on Sonoma Mountain. He and a bunch of others from the commune were going up to this church, and he told me about this 95-year-old man, Jim Swallow, that was had a church up there. And I don't know how and when, but I decided one day that I was going to go. So I did. I found the place. Amazing. Mile and a half up a dirt driveway. You had to open cattle gates and all that to get up there. So I went up there, and this is all in my testimony, a lot of this. And I won't repeat it, but that's where I got saved, up there. Well, after I got saved, Ann and I got back together. And, I loved Ann. Listen, she was a sweet girl, undeserving of the way I treated her, undeserving. I was hard with her. She was still a child. I was 26, she was 16. But she started coming up there with me. We both gave our hearts to the Lord. And they baptized us twice, actually. They baptized us together in the same tank the first time. Baptized us together. She, in her innocence, received the Lord. But we were still sleeping together. I was still doing drugs and going to church. It was that shoulder period there. Well, shortly after getting saved, by this time, I had completed a course of psychiatric technician at the junior college, and I got a job at Napa State Hospital for the criminally insane. I was working over there only about 3 months at Napa. And I'll save a long story here. I don't want to go through a very long... Well, the story's worth telling, actually. It is. So, this American Indian man, big man, 250, 300 pounds, big American Indian, long hair. He was incarcerated at the unit that I worked on because the demonic voices in his head told him to hit his father over the head with a claw hammer. So his father was watching television one day in the living room, and Terry, I can't remember his last name, I think it was Miles, Terry Miles, if I'm right. Terry followed the voices, got a claw hammer, hit his father so hard over the head that he fractured his father's skull, almost killed him. He was put in jail and found to be insane, mental illness, and transferred to my unit. This man was so sick mentally, he couldn't even carry on a conversation. He was so fragmented. If you wanted something, Steve, water. I have you get you water me for me. Couldn't even carry on a conversation. Very imposing figure. Well, anyway, there was a Christian group that used to come to the unit every Sunday, led by a young man named Stephen, same name as me, same age, 26. He had a church group called Bridge Over Troubled Waters, and they would come every Sunday around 10 in the morning and have a little church service down in the day hall for the patients. They were told by the administration that they were not to do any therapy whatsoever. But, you can't help helping somebody if you think you can. So one day he came to the office there, and Stephen said, Steve, do you know that Terry is possessed by the devil? I said, well, Stephen, I don't know that. I said, I'm a baby Christian. I'm only 3 months old. I don't know anything about demonic possession or anything. I said, I'm a psychiatric technician. I understand mental illness. But I said, you're not supposed to do any therapy down there. And he said, well, he's asked us to cast it out. Can we do it? I said, listen, brother, we didn't have this conversation. I didn't hear you say that, and you didn't tell me that. I said, what you do down there, you do, but I know nothing about it. Okay? I said, I want to support you as best I can. So he goes back, and they pray for Terry. Something like 13 demons come out of the guy, and he's thrown to the ground down in the day hall. After his deliverance, he comes up to the office, and he's got this silver chain with a beautiful silver cross that they had given him. And he comes up to the office in perfect lucidity. Steve, I'm a new creation. I'm delivered. I've given my heart to Jesus. Do you think they'll let me go now? I said, Terry, I said, the transformation is phenomenal, I have to say. I've never seen anything like it. I said, you're more lucid than I've seen you in 2 weeks. I said, you still have criminal charges. They're not going to let you go until those are solved. And, you're going to do some time, maybe in a prison or something. But I said, if you continue to be as lucid as you are today, I see no reason why they would keep you. So he thanked me. Well, that night they asked me to work 4 hours overtime. So I did. I worked through the dinner shift till about 7 or 8 o'clock. I can't remember. And I wanted to talk to him, I wanted to talk to Terry. I want to hear all about what happened. So I sat at his table for dinner. And I remember they had chicken for dinner. I just remember chicken breast and thigh or some other piece of chicken. I don't remember. But so anyway, after dinner, I said goodbye to him, and he was quite lucid. In the morning, I came in at 6 o'clock, my normal shift, and it was my job to go knock on doors and make sure everybody was awake and getting up for breakfast. And the policy was you knock on the door. If they say, yeah, I'm up, I'm okay, then you move to the next door. You don't open it. But if you knock on the door and there's no answer, and you've knocked several times, you have to open the door in case there's a suicide or a death or God knows what. So I knocked on Terry's door several times, no answer. So I opened the door, and he's standing in the doorway, pacing back and forth, this imposing figure. He had taken the cross off the chain, and he had made a cross of chicken bones with 2 green feathers sticking off the side and a plastic skull glued in the middle. Now, where on earth he got the skull, the 2 green feathers, and the glue. I'll never know. But that's what he presented with. And when he saw me, he came charging at me out the door with the most aggressive posture. I ran for my life, literally. Several other staff saw what was happening. One of them grabbed a mattress off a bed, a single mattress, and ran to him with the mattress and pressed him up against the wall, which he got out of rather quickly. 2 other staff came to the rescue, and we finally took him down and belted him with 4 straps, arms and legs, got him secured, and gave him an injection of stelazine to calm him down. He was very aggressive, and he was speaking in tongues, not godly, speaking in an ungodly tongue. It was a demonic tongue. Well, anyway, that all took place at 6 to 7 in the morning. 10 o'clock, the doorbell rings on the ward, and I go to the door to see if there's another admit, and guess who's coming in? Stephen, the Bible study leader, is being admitted to my unit as a patient. I said, Stephen, oh my God, what are you doing here? Stephen, after I delivered those demons from Terry, I went to work for Sears and Roebuck. That was my shift. He said I worked at Sears, and he said that thing came off on me. He said I was hallucinating. Everything was turning black and white. I was hallucinating. He said my bowels went loose. He said I almost pooped myself. He said I had terrible fear, anxiety. I was hearing voices in my head. He said I went up to the local mental health clinic, for help, and they decided to admit me here. And I had orders right there. He had a clipboard, with orders. He had an attendant that brought him, a staff member. But the orders were for me to give him 50 milligrams of stelazine right away. Powerful tranquilizer. I couldn't do that. He was my friend, my brother in the Lord. Oh my gosh. I thanked the man that brought him. I said, I'll take care of him. Thank you. They left. They locked the door. There was a vacant doctor's office right there to the left of the front door. I said, Stephen, let me pray for you. Stephen, no, just give me the drug, please. Just give me. I want the stelazine. Just give it to me. I gotta calm down. I'm freaking out. Give it to me. I said, Stephen, listen, I can't right now. I said, just let me at least pray with you. They've already prayed for me. The pastor was with me half the night praying for me, and nothing's worked. And I want the shot. I said, Stephen, I gotta pray for you. So I brought him in that room, got down on my hands and knees. Him too. I started praying for him. As I started praying for him, his whole face started just changing, like you've seen astronauts in the gyroscope, in the space program when the G's are hitting them and their face are starting to, his face, man, I'm watching this thing, and his tongue is going, I freaked out when I saw what was happening to him. And I left Jesus and I started preaching Timothy Leary. I knew how to bring people down off bad acid trips. I had done it many times. Turn off your mind and float downstream. Don't fight it. Just turn off your mind, follow the stream. The stream will take you to an eddy. And, I started ministering all this Timothy Leary. Nothing was working. He got worse. He was crying. He begged me for the shot. Well, at that point, I was ready to get rid of him. I was scared. I took him down, gave him the shot. He went to bed, knocked out. Well, I was supposed to marry Ann. The next day was my wedding, and I had a week's vacation coming after that. So, man, I just wanted to get out of that place. I had seen all of this that morning, and Stephen, I just wanted to get out of there. Well, about that time, LMA, one of the psych techs, said, oh, Stephen, can you help me escort this other client down to physical therapy? The law was you had to have two staff to take a client off the unit for safety. So I said, sure, LMA, I'll be glad to come with you and escort him down. We're walking down the hall outside the unit. We had left the unit. We're walking to physical therapy. And that demon hit me. It came off on me like it did with Stephen Miles. Oh my God. Everything changed to black and white. just like an old black and white photo negative, those of you that are old enough to remember. I was hallucinating. My blood was pounding. My pulse must have been 120. My bowels went loose. I had such anxiety that it was like a dog on the freeway running to and fro. I could barely keep myself from running, just freaking out and running. And I went totally white. I mean, just pale, head to foot pale. Ella May looked at me and she goes, "Oh my God, you don't look well." And of course, I said, "Ella May, I don't feel well." I said, "I'm really sick." I said, "I got to go back to the unit." I didn't tell her what was happening. My God, they locked me up, you know. I don't want to get locked up in a psych unit. Tell her I was hearing voices and, you know. So I tried my best to play sick. And she said, "Oh, he's a good patient." She said, don't worry. Go back. I can handle this. And he was a good patient, you know. So I ran back to the unit, right? It's about 1 p.m. now. It's about 1. I locked myself in the bathroom. I was in the bathroom for 30 minutes till people were pounding on the door saying, "Hey man, you fall in there? Come on, I got to use the bathroom." I was so scared to come out of the bathroom because if anyone saw me, they would look in my eyes and see that I was just wild and crazy. I mean, I couldn't even contain. And the whole time in the bathroom, I was on my face, I mean, over the toilet, just praying, you know, on my knees and weeping and praying. I had to get out of the bathroom. I had to do something. So I made a beeline across the hall to the medication room. Now, you got to remember, back in the 80s, 70s, 72, 73, 74, back in there, they didn't have controls on drugs like they do today. We didn't even count drugs. We had Valium, we had everything in the med room. We just passed it out to whoever needed it, you know. So, man, I knew I needed something. So I took 10 milligrams of Valium, which was there, swallowed it. And it did help, you know, when I came on the Valium, I was a little calmer. But I got off at 3 and I had to make it. I had to make it till 3. So I kept myself in that med room reading charts so that nobody would look at me. If they came in, they'd see the back of my head, not my face. And I was hallucinating still, hearing voices and all of that. So finally, you know, a couple of people said, "Hey man, you know, it's almost 2 o'clock. You know, if you want to leave early, that's okay. You know, you're getting married tomorrow, man. You got a vacation. We'll cover you. You know, if you want to take off early, take off early. Everything's calm." So I got the heck out of there, right? I went to my car. I couldn't drive. I just couldn't drive. I was hallucinating so bad. I called Ann. She was 16. She had driven, but she didn't have a license. But I had let her drive a couple times. She borrowed her girlfriend's car and came and got me at Napa State Hospital. She brought a friend that drove my car back. So she came and got me. She spent the night at my house that night, and forget lovemaking. There was no way. I was in such distress, such incredible distress. Well, anyway, the next day was my wedding. Had a lot of people invited. We were getting married in my parents' backyard. They had a fish pond back there, a concrete fish pond with about 2.5 feet of water. I couldn't go out to the wedding. I was hallucinating so bad I couldn't go out to the wedding. Jonathan and our pastor, Richard Paradise, and several other people were there, you know, praying over me. Well, it wasn't Richard, actually. It was Jim Swallow, the old man on the mountain. Richard was there at the wedding. He was there. He wasn't yet our pastor, but Jim Swallow was. And they kept saying, where are you, Steve? Come on, we got to get this thing going. Well, I was in the back room praying with about 5 brothers. I couldn't even come out. Ann was all dressed, ready for the wedding. Finally, I knew I had to do it. And with the strength, I don't know how I did it, but I managed to come out. They performed the wedding, pronounced us man and wife. I was so committed to Jesus that I preached a short sermon and baptized 2 people in that fish pond. 2 people got saved at my wedding, led them to the Lord. As soon as I was done with the wedding, I got the heck out of there, man. I got out. We had a big reception, food and all that. I didn't stay. I told everybody, I said, listen, we want to get on our honeymoon early. You guys stay and enjoy the reception, blah, blah, blah. It was an excuse. I mean, I would have loved to have stayed for the reception. I couldn't. I was in such bad shape. But we made it, left, drove to Yosemite, got to Yosemite, hallucinating, terrible, and drove most of the way to Yosemite. I couldn't do anything. I forget lovemaking. Couldn't even to my wife. No way. I just was tormented all night long. Well, the next morning was Sunday morning. I was determined that we would go to church in Yosemite on Sunday morning, the little chapel there. We went to church. How I made it, I don't know. But when I was inside the church, the demonic voices left me. I was quite normal in the church. Funny, they couldn't enter there. I thought that was interesting. Anyway, we gave a beautiful testimony about our marriage in the church, and the pastor took the entire offering that morning and put it in a paper bag and told us to get dinner at the Owanahi restaurant, a highly expensive restaurant in Yosemite. So I made reservations for the Owanahi for that night. When we got to the Owanahi, I placed my order and placed her order. I think we ordered like filet mignon or something. When the meal came, I couldn't even eat it. I was hallucinating. So terrible. It was just horrible, horrible, horrible. We left our food on the plate, got in our car, drove home, gave up our reservations for a week. We had a week in Yosemite. Gave it up. We were going to hike. We were going to do all this. Couldn't do it. Couldn't stay. Got home, went up to Oakcrest, the psych unit, the next morning. I said, listen, you guys, I got to have some help. And I said, this is what happened, to me. I told him the story I'm telling you. Well, the social worker that was working with me at the Oakcrest, he said, Steve, now listen, you're a professional. You're a psychiatric technician. You know there's no such thing as God and the devil. Get real here. You're an intelligent man. You believe in this foolishness? You believe there's a devil running around, on the earth? Well, listen, I'm still only 3 months old in the Lord, mind you. I have never read the Word of God, really. I don't know much of anything. All I know is I'm a mess, So he counseled us. He said, you guys, he said, you got married awful young, Ann. You're 16. Are you sure this is what you want for your life? You want to be married to this man? He's 10 years your senior. This is borders on pedophilia here. You sure this is what you want out of life? And started questioning our marriage, whether our marriage was a good thing. And he started telling us, that the best thing we could do was throw those Bibles in the garbage can and get back to, quote, reality. We were such a mess and hurting so bad, both of us. She's just a child. She's fearful, man. She sees what I'm going through. She's scared. Well, we got home to my house. Now she's my wife, right? So she's living with me now, not with her parents anymore. We get back to the house, and we threw our Bibles in the garbage can. And guess what? Things got better right away. As soon as I renounced the Lord, I renounced Jesus Christ, renounced my baptism, everything, turned my back on Christianity. And guess what? Made love with my wife for the first time since all of this started. Everything seemed wonderful. Well, Jim Swallow, the old pastor, the 95-year-old, he came down to visit me. He had heard that I had left the Lord. He wept on my doorstep. I wouldn't open the door. When he knocked on the door, I heard his voice, and I would not open to him. And he got on his knees on my doorstep and wept, called out on the Lord in tears for my life and my salvation. No one ever cared for me. I treated that man so cruel. Well, anyway, in 3 months, we were separated. We started fighting. Nothing was working. I was a father figure to her. I was 26 and I wanted her to be responsible. She was driving without insurance. She was driving without a license. She refused to go get a license, and she would take the car without my knowing it. Sometimes I'd leave my car at the state hospital and come out and find it gone. She was hanging out with her friends, drinking and, partying with her friends. And of course, now she's my wife. I don't want her doing that stuff. So 3 months we were separated, and 6 months we divorced. That was a very painful time in my life. And at that part, after our divorce, I backslid. And I found an ex-military friend of mine that had moved to Boys Hot Springs, Craig Frankowitz. And he and I moved in together, roommates. And we were the sad couple. He had had an encounter with Christ that he had left too. So he was backslidden and I was backslidden. And we were a sad couple. I mean, we'd go out to bars and drink Coca-Colas because we had too much of Jesus. He had changed us where we couldn't really drink alcohol anymore. I didn't want it. But we were looking for somebody like us that was not too religious, but was a good person. I was looking for a, quote, good person, a good woman that wasn't too religious, and him too. Well, that went on for a year of loneliness and hitting the bars and the nightclubs and backslidden, totally forsook the mountain and all the brothers that were up on the mountain, that hippie church that was up there. After a year, I kept telling Craig, I said, Craig, you got to give your life back to Jesus. I said, the woman you're looking for, you're not going to find her in a bar. I said, you want a godly woman. She'll stay by you, a woman that loves God. Well, how about you? How come you don't go back to church? I said, it's not for me. I said, I am not interested in church. But I said, I think you should. I said, I think you'd find what you're looking for. Well, one day I came home, he had his bags packed, and I said, what are you doing? And he said, I'm moving out. He said, Steve, they offered me a room. He said, I've been going to this little church down in El Verano, and they have a men's house. There's about 8 or 9 men living there, and they've got a vacancy. He said, I gave my life back to Jesus, and I'm moving into the men's house. Oh, I was happy for him, but sad for me. Now I'm all by myself and my pain and my heartache. I'm just in pain. All this year of divorce, and of course multiple tries to get back with Ann. No, she had another boyfriend she was sleeping with at that point and wanted nothing to do with me. And pastors had visited me after that, and I did talk with them, and they had written her and tried to get her to come back to me, and she would not. And so the divorce became final and all of that. So I'm the sad sack. I'm lonely, right? So Craig kept inviting me to the Wednesday night meeting. I guess the Spirit of God was moving there in El Verano. And these were people that went to church on Sunday up in the mountain and now had this Wednesday night meeting in El Verano. Well, I'll tell you, on Wednesdays I was tormented. Part of me wanted to go. Part of me wanted nothing to do with Christianity. I had finally got my sanity back. The demons were gone. I thought they were gone. They weren't. They were still resident, not operating. Well, anyway, one Wednesday night, I paced the floor from 7 till almost 9 p.m. The Holy Spirit was pushing me to go to this meeting, and I was fighting tooth and nail. I did not want to be around Christians. I literally paced, for almost 2 hours. Finally, around 8:30, I got in my car and I drove to the Wednesday night meeting. I got there at about 8:45. It ended usually at 9. They had all been on their knees praying for me at 8:45 when I drove to the meeting. When I walked in the door, they were just getting up from prayer for me, and a shout went up. I mean, you can imagine, they were praying that I would get saved. And a shout went up when I walked in the door. And brothers I knew from the mountain during my time up there were hugging me and loving me and welcoming me back. And I just started bawling, and crying and asked Jesus to forgive me. And I recommitted my whole life to him that night, that Wednesday night, committed my whole life to him, started going back up the mountain and asked Jim Swallow to rebaptize me. The first time I got baptized with Ann. But I was a sinner. My heart was not right with God. This time I was ready, and I meant it with all my heart. So that's the day that they broke the ice off the tank and baptized me. It was in February sometime. It was the last baptism he did, the one I mentioned in my testimony. After that, I walked 7 years, single and celibate, before God as a true brother, committed to Jesus, and tried for 7 years to get Ann to come back. Apologized, did everything I could. By that time, halfway through the 7 years, I guess about 3 years into it, she remarried, and I knew it was over at that point. That's another story. I was in a donut shop and I wanted to read the newspaper, and I went to put my money in the San Francisco Chronicle, in the newspaper vendor thing, and it's like the Holy Spirit moved my hand, and I put the money in the Sonoma Index Tribune. Oh my God, there was nothing in the Index Tribune. The Dragons football team, the local high school, team, and Mrs. Jones' cow had a calf, and I mean, there's nothing in the Index Tribune that I would ever be interested to. And as I lost my quarter in the Index Tribune, I'm walking back to the table, cursing myself for having put the quarter in the wrong newspaper. When I sat down, I opened the paper to the weddings and obituaries, and there it was. Ann Harvey married Dennis Burt. I would have never known. The Lord showed me that she had remarried. If I had not opened that paper that day, I wouldn't have even known. But at that point, it was over anyway. And so I walked with Jesus for 7 years. And the next chapter, I'll pick up where I left off. Thank you. This went a little long, but that's the story.